All right, in the latest twist, a judge has now ruled that Alabama player Charles Bediako may not return to the university. This after he played in the NBA G League. So, Amanda, this no doubt seems like a win for the NCAA here.
100%. This was a major case that the entirety of college basketball was watching because it was going to draw a line about what a professional athlete meant in men's college basketball. There are G Leaguers who are allowed to go back and play men's college basketball. There are international professional athletes that are allowed to play in men's college basketball. There are not, however, men's college basketball players who have signed NBA contracts, including a two-way contract, that can go back to college, and that was what Bediako was trying to argue he should be able to do. A judge ruled against him on Monday night and said that, his case wasn't strong enough for the preliminary injunction, which is what would have allowed him to play. And now he's got to hang up his jersey.
Yeah, the preliminary injunction, earlier one that said he could play, was interesting because it came from a judge who had really close ties to the university.
Right, and so that first ruling, it's funny because there's even a more preliminary injunction to a preliminary injunction that is called a temporary restraining order.
Right.
And that is usually only in place for like 10 days. And that was what allowed Charles Bediako to play for those 5 games. It ended up being longer than you would have expected because the hearing got pushed back due to weather. And then, as you mentioned, as Front Office Sports and others reported, the initial judge who granted that temporary restraining order had donated at least 6 figures to the Alabama Athletic Department. So he ended up recusing himself, and the different judge was assigned in the case. And the different judge, Daniel Pruitt, was the one who handed down the preliminary injunction, which reversed the TRO.
So what are Bediako's, next steps or options here? Does he plan to appeal? And what does this sort of mean for the wider group of guys, from him to James Najee to all these other ones that you're seeing, play college basketball, go play in another league, be it a G League or internationally, and try to come back into the NCAA?
Yeah, Bediako has options. He could stay at Alabama and complete his education. The school has confirmed that they'll honor his scholarship if he wants to, or he could go back to try to go back to the G League. He could try to play overseas, but he just can't play in college. As for other players, the interesting thing about this ruling is that it doesn't necessarily set a binding precedent. It sets a precedent that the NCAA could cite in other states if another athlete who has played, or not even played, who has signed an NBA contract, if they try to argue in a different state that player should be allowed to play based on that state's laws, the NCAA could cite this, but it doesn't, it's not a guarantee. And that's, I think, the scariest part for everybody, that even though this was, a line in the sand, it wasn't definitive because of the way the courts work.
The NCAA clearly looking at this as a victory. Charlie Baker calling this a rational decision. What's the NCAA going to do next to sort of make sure that a lot of these players aren't playing in the NCAA?
Well, what they're trying to do right now is to lobby in Congress for an exemption under the Sherman Antitrust Act, which would give them the legal ability and authority to stop these lawsuits and to set eligibility rules that can't be challenged. But in doing that, they are also asking for 6 other things that are some of which are very controversial politically, and they don't seem to be interested in a one-off law that would give them just an exemption around eligibility rules specifically. So it's going to be very difficult for them to get anything done in Congress, and outside of collective bargaining, really all they can do is keep fighting in court.
Amanda Kristovich, you can follow her, of course, on her socials for more on all of this, and stay with Front Office Sports for more on the business and culture of sports.